back. We're looking forward to continue on page Kuf Tes on this fifth Igeres HaKodesh epistle, letter of the Attire, which, as we mentioned in the past, the Igeres HaKodesh is distinct in its style in comparison to the other segments of Tanya. For that matter, Kuntra Sachin is, of course, unique and different a bit than the previous segments, the 5 segments in Tanya, which is Shayichud Likutei Amarim, Shayichud B'Emunah, Igeres HaTshuva, Igeres HaKodesh, and Kuntras Achin. Namely, these are letters written at different times, based on different circumstances. Alter Rebbe felt he had to encourage different matters. We did mention time and again, many of these letters are underscore the mitzvah tzedakah, which Alter Rebbe basically was running this campaign, if you will, to finance and fund the famous Aliyah of Ramedel Haradoker, which Alter Rebbe considered him a Talmud Chaver, with his people, and they were going through a very difficult time, and Alter Rebbe was raising money for them. So even though, and of course it's timeless, because the way the Alter Rebbe underscores the mitzvah tzedakah and Igeres HaKodesh is certainly a timeless message, extremely unique, changes, metamorphoses our whole approach and our whole appreciation to that mitzvah tzedakah. But it's not everything is, not every letter is tzedakah. We did mention in the past, you could definitely say this is a common thread throughout the Igeres HaKodesh. But there's different Igeres HaKodesh, for that matter. It's underscores Torah, learning Torah Barabim. And again, there are different times and different periods Alter Rebbe encourage different communities throughout and throughout the entire, under his tutelage and leadership. But again, the timeless message of Alter Rebbe for the entire Nachlas HaKlal, for the entire Am Yisrael. So Igeres, we did one of the things, again, of course, Igeres HaKodesh as such is not sequentially written. Every letter is a letter on its own. Hey is a lengthier letter. We did note this in the past. We begin here on page Kuf Tes in the original text, Uvazeh Yuvan. With this is understood with what? So we have to see the previous class. In the previous class, wherever you're watching it, is the easiest place to access is in the original website. TanyaOnline.com, TanyaOnline, one word.com, which all the previous classes are set up on the left side of the screen, and the more recent classes are on top of that. On top of that, on top of the row. That is, it's really easy to access. We did mention, of course, for newcomers, it's an advantage as well. They could always find the text which to the class you're listening to, and easy to follow because it's on a separate scroll bar, and easy to find the text which in conjunction with the shir, with the class. So we continue over here again. Uvazeh Yuvan, where this is understood. We always say a little bit of the past, and sometimes we feel we take too much of the past. Basically, the connection Uvazeh with this, it's understood. Basically the message in the previous class or classes, the essentiality of getting involved in Gemilas Chasadim, and doing kindness. Vis-a-vis learning Torah, even though Torah brings the Hamshacha, Torah is the Chochmah B'Kodesh Baruch Hu. Dr. Rebbe defined the idea of the Abba Yosad Brato, the whole idea of speech comes from the Chochmah Shebenefesh, the deepest parts of the Nefesh, yet they express themselves externally with the Heimetzes Sapeh, we call them the 5 instruments of the mouth. So Chochmah does the job to start bringing the Hamshacha down, but nonetheless, it has to touch down and has to materialize. And therefore, the way to materialize is through that heitata, which corresponds to the heimetzes hapeh, to the actual speech, together with the healthy human being which is able to speak. And that is really where speech initiates, comes from, not through the heimetzes hapeh, not through the 5 instruments. Of course, now we gave the example of mute, Rahman al-Islam. It's the healthy nefesh, Adam nefesh chaya, the Targum Taishas nefesh memolala, the talking soul, which is the healthy soul, is able to talk because speech comes from the most nuanced sources and energy of the nefesh, which is the chochmah shebenefesh. and then eventually it manifests in order to produce an actual phrase, an actual sentence, an actual word. To pronounce the word comes, of course, through the Heimetzes Apeh, through the 5 instruments of the mouth, which is the which in the Nimshol, the Alter Rebbe says the difference between the Talmid Chachamim, people who learn Torah. Torah is the Chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the beginning of the Hashpah, but it ought to touch down. It ought to materialize. This Hamshacha has to come in order to come down to make a difference in this physical world, which is associated right away with that Heitato. Ki bekoh Hashem tzori olamim. The Gemara tells us b'yud nivra elam haba. B'yud nivra elam haba experiences are associated with the yud, of course. But you're talking about behei nivra elam. You need the Heimetzes Apeh. The Hamshacha should come down and touch down and make a difference in this very physical world. You need the Gemilas Chasadim, you need the kindness, you need the action, you need the execution of tzedakah, of charitable work, charity, compassion, Gemilas Chasadim, to be actual goyimel, to actual do, extend kindness to another fellow human being. That would correspond to the Heimetzes Apeh, the externality of speech, but yet that, in the end of the day, causes the phrase, that pronunciation of the actual word, or the conveying of that word, of that sentence that you want to convey, which is associated with Olam Hazeh Beheini B'Olam Haba, Olam Hazeh, and this is why this is the basis of the significance and essentiality of executing good kindness and good deeds and charity and so on. So you got to still see the previous class to understand this message accurately. Of course you do. So again, it's on the original website, as we just mentioned, TanyaOnline.com. This might be the even 8th class on the page. So you want to have a greater understanding of what the whole message of Igeres HaKodesh, this Igeres, the 5th epistle of the Alter Rebbe, you have to really go from the very beginning. But again, Uvazeh is referring to, is understandably referring to this previous message, which Alter Rebbe picks up on. Uvazeh Yuvan, this is understood, Masham Arizal, Mashkos of Arizal, which the Arizal writes, Shesh Beis Min and Neshamas B'Yisrael. There's 2 types of souls among Yidden. There's the souls of Talmid Chachamim which learn Torah all their days. V'neshamis Baalei Mitzvah, and the neshamis of masters of mitzvahs, of good deeds, which occupy themselves, which is again not only do tzedakah, but their occupation is with charitable work and extending kindness. Now, when you say b'minin neshamis, which means you're not only dividing and compartmentalizing, okay, there's people who do this and people who do that. No, this compartmentalization is on a real deep level. B'neshamis, there's certain neshamis which are carved to be Talmid Chachamim, and they have their objective and goal, which is to draw the ikir energy. Like we said, speech comes from the nefesh, and you're talking about Hashem's talking. So how do you bring the core of Hashem's chokhmah, which is, again, these words are based on the previous classes, on the Igeres HaKodesh up till now, this letter up till now. So what draws that Chachma Shebenefesh? Of course, anything this which is associated with Chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Torah, is called Chachmasi Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chachmasi is Baruch, the wisdom of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a pasuk. Ki Chachmaschem U'minaschem. Torah is the Chachmei love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Alter Rebbe writes many times. In Likutei Amarim, primarily, they're describing the Chach, the Torah, Perek Hey in Tanya, other places in Tanya. It's the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, this is a Lashon in Zayar. This is besides in Teres HaNigla, in Teres Shebiksav, Chach Maskem Avinaskem. Pnimis HaTorah brings about how this is connected to the Chachmei love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to draw that down. Of course, it's through the Talmid Chacham. So there's neshamis, which are Talmid Chacham. So this is the idea. That he's not telling us, go into the kollel, you'll see people learning Torah, and go into that meeting, this communal meeting, you'll see people are involved in Milch Chasadim. Well, that's obvious. In every community, there's Talmid Chacham, and the people are more devoted to charitable work that's stuck in Milch Chasadim. That's the way the communities move on. That's the way you have the success and fruition of an established, healthy community. But the Arizal doesn't have to tell this to us. The Arizal tells Yesh bin Neshamis, which means on the deepest levels, on the onset, there's Neshamis which are conducive and produced, or there rather, to be Tamidei Chachamim. And there is Neshamis which are conducive, and this is the way they're established on high, to be those who get involved, who are occupy themselves, not get involved, occupy themselves in tzedakah, charitable work, and extending kindness. So the Rebbe says, how do you do that? How do you compartmentalize like that on the deepest level of neshames? Apparently, l'cheira gami tamid chacham tzrichim lasik b'milas chasadim. What do you mean these tamid chachamim don't have to get involved in b'milas chasadim? Every yid has to get involved in b'milas chasadim. It's a mitzvah of the Torah. L'havta l'recha kamecha, love your fellow as yourself. And for that matter, in the Rambam, the Rambam himself, based of course on the Gemara said this is a spirit. This mitzvah is a rule. The Rabbi Kiva says a klal gadol b'Torah, but many mitzvahs, many actual mitzvahs are directly connected with this mitzvah. As the Rambam himself enumerates when he explains this mitzvah, it's not just a spirit of love to another, to a fellow yid, but it's these many mitzvahs as he lines them up, and again, they're all associated with tzedakah, millennia chasadim, charitable work, extension of kindness, which is all in compassion to another party. In other words, executing the compassion, being hospitable, extending oneself to another party. This is all based on v'ahavta l'recha kamecha. So this is a mitzvah in Torah where the Talmud Chacham doesn't have to get involved in millennia chasadim. Of course, he has to get involved in millennia chasadim, because it's a mitzvah in Torah. You can't just seclude himself. Oh, I'm just involved in Torah. Let someone else do the Gemilas Chasadim. No, he has to, of course, do the Gemilas Chasadim. This is a yid. He has this it's an obligation for every yid to get involved in Gemilas Chasadim. So what was that Arizal saying? So again, the question is really on the Arizal. The fact that you find in communities people are more inclined to learn Torah and people are more inclined to Gemilas Chasadim, that doesn't arouse a question, because of course they are involved in Gemilas Chasadim as well, and they're involved in learning Torah. They don't have a shir in Torah. The one who occupies himself in charitable work doesn't have a shir every day in Torah, twice a day. He doesn't get involved. Of course he does. So there's no question when you want to just say, well, in every community there's these two. And this is of course not what Arizal was saying. Arizal made a statement, not just defining or telling us what goes on with Jewish community from all time and from the beginning of time. He's telling us there's neshamis, which means there's neshamis on a soul level. There's neshamis which are meant to be involved in Torah. There's neshamis that are meant to be involved in tzedakah and gemilas chasadim. What's that supposed to mean? These neshamas don't have to get involved in gemilas chasadim, like hagam tamid chacham tzrichim lasik gemilas chasadim. Kimay mirazal. There is also shafila teira, like that if the Talmud Chacham doesn't get involved in tzedakah and gemilas chasadim, not only is lacking tzedakah and gemilas chasadim, but even the Torah that he learns is compromised. So the question is a double question. He has to get involved in gemilas chasadim, but more so, you call him a Talmud Chacham. You want to acknowledge his Torah? No, his Torah learning there's a lack, there's a compromise in his Torah's learning, says the Gemara, because he's not getting involved in Gemilas Chasadim, and it's part of him being a Talmud Chacham and being succeeding with being the Talmud Chacham. For that matter, interesting, Talmud Chacham is never called a Chacham. It's called a Talmud. It's a student of Chachma, because at the end of the day, a Talmud Chacham is someone who's a student to the Chachmei love, because Baruch Hu, he's constantly submissive to the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not about him. It's not about the individual or his self-acknowledgement. Oh, I'm the Talmud. No, you're a Talmud. You're submissive to the Chachmei love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the divine wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that the Torah has to be successful. The Torah has to be fruitful. The Torah has to be productive. The Torah has to be the Torah of Hashem, which this individual, with this Yid, is involved with establishes him to be the Talmud Chacham. And if he doesn't do Gemilas Chasadim, Torah itself says that compromises your learning Torah. So where's the Talmud Chacham? Where's the full-fledged Talmud Chacham if he's not involved in Gemilas Chasadim? Asks the Alter Rebbe. So it's not only they're lacking Gemilas Chasadim, but the Gemara says Avilut Teira. The Rebbe answers, of course, the Talmud Chacham is involved in this chasadim, because again, if not, there's a lack of his being his being a Talmud Chacham is fragmented. There's a fragmentation of his status as being a Talmud Chacham. So of course the Talmud Chacham is involved in this chasadim, even those neshamas which are meant to be Talmud Chacham. Main thing is his Torah. Most of his days is toiling in Torah. And a part of the day, of course, in hours, in concentration, the significant majority of his hours and his concentration is learning Torah. He's a Talmud Chacham. But the minority of his days is in Gemilas Chasadim. So of course they're involved in Gemilas Chasadim and charitable work. Again, it's a mitzvah in Torah. And again, that stabilizes and anchors and authenticates their being the Talmud Chacham because they're involved in Gemilas Chasadim. But the idea when you say Neshamas Medachamim, in comparison to their focus and energy and time on the clock, of course, as well, they're involved in Limnat Torah, they would be Neshamas of a Talmid Chacham, because Yerev Yemeim, they're in Torah, Meet Yemeim, so in the Pu'ulas, he said, L'sat Leir Chesed Elim Shalaham, L'ham Shechaleir, Der Insof Amlosh B'chachim, L'am Mokir Teres Hashem B'fiyim, Mirak Leil Man Shamash B'briya, Al Yidei Sekat Talmud. How therefore, because their main focus is on Limud Torah, so their accomplishments, of course, is everything they accomplish. And as we mentioned in the previous classes, as we said when you're talking about speech, again, you have to see the class, the connection to speech, to this whole narrative, or the whole presentation of the Alter Rebbe regarding Neshamas, Malachim, or the Limud Torah, or the Kima Mitzvahs, one connected to the source of speech, which comes from the healthy nefesh. The nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Torah. The Chochmei Lo Kaviyachol, of course, Chochmei Lo is the Torah. Chochma Shebenefesh is the deepest faculty, which is really that close, or a nafshistic faculty, as we explained so many times for that matter in the very beginning of Likutei Amarim, the third chapter. The Alter Rebbe introduces Chochma as Koyach Ma. It's a faculty, but completely submissive, or completely transmits the Ein Sof, the famous expression of the Alter Rebbe in Perek Lamed Hey in Tanya, Kasher Shamaiti Memedi Teir Chochma HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Echad HaEmes, which transmits the Ein Sof, or is a container to the Ein Sof. It's Ma, Keach Ma. It's not a Metzias, because the whole Metzias is just a transmitter of or a Keli to, and a transmitter of the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what Torah is all about. This is what the objective and goal of the Talmud Chacham, to draw from the Sheirush and Mokir of Dibur. But because it's on a spiritual plane, because you're talking about the Chochma Shebenefesh, before it manifests and before it becomes a mitzias of dibur, before it becomes a phrase and a statement. And again, when one wants to establish a connection with another party, to get a message across to a fellow friend, or to a neighbor, or to a society, or to make a difference in a workflow force or something, it needs a speech in order to make that difference. The fact that he's able to speak, and he's a healthy human being, and he has that chochma shebenefesh, he has that nafshistik ability to talk, doesn't yet make things real on the plane, the physical plane, where he or she wants to make it real. In order that to happen, it has to be formulated as words. And again, we mentioned last week, it's not two separate times you draw from the Chochmah Shebenefesh and then you bring it into letters. It happens simultaneously, but nonetheless, there's a clear distinction between the two. Again, we give the example of the mute the other day. The classes on this very chapter, that by him there's a compromise in his Chochmah Shebenefesh. He has the full Hey Meitzes Apeh, but he still can't produce a word. But together with that, produce a structured sentence. It's a battle, because again, his Chochmah Shebenefesh is compromised. That's the definition of the mute. Not that he doesn't have Not that there's a lack of complete shleimus in his completion shleimus, which means adequate structure in the five instruments. Heimetzes Apeh, there's five instruments. But ultimately, if you want to make a difference, if you want to pronounce the word, it has to be presented precisely through these heimetzes, these five instruments in the mouth, in order to make a difference on ground level in the areas you want to make a difference. The fact that you're a healthy nefesh and you're able to talk won't make a difference in this which in the area you want to actually make that very difference on all levels, personal, family, society, in your workplace. You have an idea, you want to bring it to the table, you have to talk it out, you have to verbalize it, you have to utter the words. This is a good idea, let's try it, we'll make some more money, or whatever it is. So anything lacking that, even though you have the koyach of dibur, and in this case, drawing from the chokhmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where the core energy is, and bringing it down. But in the end of the day, because Torah is associated with that level of the dibur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu kaviyachol, and therefore, sure, it draws the energy and the core energy, and this is really where the energy is, not in the heimetzes Apeh. The heimetzes Apeh is just the second level. As the Alter Rebbe writes, this is the chitzonius of dibur, as we learned in the previous classes on this Igeres HaKodesh. Again, a click away. As we can all appreciate, these are the instruments which bring that dibur into establish a structure to the dibur. That a person is able to pronounce a word, a sentence, a phrase, which that's where it makes a difference. So the Alter Rebbe said, these Talmidei Chachamim, of course they're involved in Mizchas Chasodim, but because they're namely involved in Torah, they draw the energy, and it makes a difference on the spiritual plane, which is in Olam after the Neshamis in Olam HaBriya, which, as we mentioned so many times, Briya is the domain of Gan Eden HaElyon, Yitzira the domain of Gan Eden HaTachtin. So where are you making a difference? You're making a difference, namely to the neshamas of Bria, when you're involved in Talmud. Again, the Alter Rebbe has it in Likutei Amorim. It's worth to see how he has it later also in Chavav and Igeres HaKodesh, which we didn't learn yet, but in Likutei Amorim in the 52nd chapter, I believe it is. So Alter Rebbe explains there how the Talmud is associated with Olam HaBriya, Mishnah with Olam HaYitzira, because based on this, what it says, we're not going to go into it now, you can see it there. There's 52nd also, it's a click away, a Likutei Amorim, which is the first segment, the 52nd chapter. So the Alter Rebbe, it's all based on this, which it says that the Chochma Ilav HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mekanana and Atzilus, Nes and Atzilus, the Bina of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nes and Olam HaBriya, the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nes in Olam HaYitzira. Thus, the direct connection between Talmud, making it associated with Bria, because Talmud is Binaseh Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, the wisdom in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the expansion of wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is the Talmud. Mishnah, even though it comes prior to Gemara, Talmud, to the expansion of the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but nonetheless, in Mishnah you have more the Piskei Halachas, you have the Piskei Dinim, Kosher, Muter, Toyer, Posel, Chayav, Zakai. This is all in the Mishnah. Even though there's arguments in the Mishnah, you have the codifiers of Halacha starting from the Rambam. In the end of the day, where there is no machlekes, but the Mishnah is all about Piskei Dinim. Of course, that is associated with Olam HaYitzira, because they are the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mekanan, Nest, and Olam HaYitzira. Midas is about Chesed, namely, primarily, chiefly in the setup of midas is mentioned a number of times, that all the midas really stem from Chesed and Gvura. So you have Chesed and Gvura, and the reason why this is Potter, because it comes and it's sourced and it's anchored in the spirit of Chesed. Therefore, it's Potter. Therefore, it's Zakai. One walks out meritorious, or it's mutter, it could be elevated, Again, as Alter Rebbe explains, there is Beis Hillel, Vishamai, also a chapter that we didn't learn yet, which is Perik Yud Gimel in Igeres HaKedesh. You can find it anywhere, of course. Yud Gimel in Igeres HaKedesh. Why Beishamai would be more machmir, why another would be more stringent, and Hillel would be more lenient, because there's the source of their neshamas. One was anchored in chesed, and one more in gvura. That explains there that ultimately the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are ultimately there's harmony in the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because you're talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu echad miyuchad. Therefore, sometimes Beishamai is mekel, is lenient, and Beis Hillel is sometimes stringent. But we can understand and appreciate the Piskei Dinim come from Chesed and Gvura, which is the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We said Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nes Neil Ma'itzira, so that's where the Makar of Mishnah is. That's what Mishnah is associated with. So when the Talmid Chachamim make a difference, they're mamshich the supreme kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to draw the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is invested in Chachmilah, which is the source of their Torah, is to the words of the Neshamas of a Bria, to the souls of the world of Bria, through their occupation of Talmud, and their difference and drawing the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be manifest in Yitzira is to the angels of Yitzira through their learning Mishnah. But if you want to make a difference down here in Elam Hazam, this is what Alter Rebbe is getting at, it's so vital and important. The other segment among Yidden, the other neshamas which are involved, they're Baile Mitzvahs and Gmilas Chasadim. And not only they periodically do or frequently do tzedakah and Gmilas Chasadim, but they're eiskim big mitzvah tzedakah and Gmilas Chasadim. Their occupation, they occupy themselves in charitable work. And in Gmilas Chasadim, so they're already associated, this is already associated with the Hey Meitzes Apeh, which is the Lehei Tata, or the Yud Kei, which the Gemara says, Behei Nivra Olam Hazeh. Yeah, Yud is associated with Olam Haba, and the Yud is connected to the Chachmilah, to the Torah, which is associated with Olam Haba, in all levels of Olam Haba, starting from Bria and then Yitzira, and so on. But if you want to make a difference in this, which corresponds to the Hey, which is the externality of speech, associated with the Hey Meitzes Apeh, also the number 5, as the Alter Rebbe explains earlier, the number 5, and also all the letters begin with the Hey, which is the breath, which ultimately strikes on the Hay Meitzes Apeh, which produces and establishes these words. In other words, you want to make a difference on this physical plane, in Elam Hasiyah, so then you need the Balit Stoko, you need the Game of Chasadim. That's what the Alter Rebbe continues. Because the Nishom, as the Malach, Alter Rebbe still continues with these result and effect of the Talmidei Chachamim, because the energy of these neshamas and malachim come from the configuration of the letters of the speech of the Torah that Talmidei Chachamim learn, which is the Torah Shlapeh, the oral Torah. And the source of the Oisi is from Chochmah, like we mentioned before, which this is the end of this phrase here. Alter Rebbe is saying that ultimately there also you have oisios, which make things happen, because nothing can happen without letters. Just like to say this, explain this briefly, peripherally. When you have, for example, a thought, when you have a insight, so your insight's coming from your chokhmah, speech, the way you pronounce it, or the way you explain it to yourself, that's not what the Chokhmah is all about. It's the insight, which is coming from the Chokhmah of your nefesh. Especially, it's a deep insight. But nonetheless, the fact that you know about it, there is the formation of that Chokhmah, of that insight. And the fact you're cognizant about it, the fact you're conscious about it. In other words, you have something. You have some structured idea in your mind, of course. That has to be. There's Isis, which is the Isis HaMachshava, which enclose this Chokhmah to have this presented as a presentation, not to another party, but even to yourself. As explained a number of places, that anything else, if it's not clothed, just like someone does not go out without getting dressed, it's conventionally accepted that that you're within. And then when you step out of your rooms. You present yourself in the first type of presentation, you're wearing something. You're enclosed with something, and the more you present yourself to the outside world, the more you establish your attire to be part of that presentation, because you have to present yourself outside, and also depending where you're going. If it's a office, you're dressed in one way, and if it's doing exercise, another way, because the garments establishes the fact what you're involved with. It's not the clothes or the tie which is making the deal. It's you, the way you're set up as a professional thinker or an executive thinker, that is, in a business world, as an example, is putting on that attire to make the presentation a decent presentation and should fit to the environment, and ultimately the deal will go through. You don't go off the tennis court rushing into a deal. It usually won't happen. So is it the attire which is making the deal? No. It's the way you present it's your executive thinking, which is ultimately introducing this deal, or this idea, that is, which hopefully will come to fruition. But there's an attire, a particular attire, which allows you to establish yourself at the workplace in order that you should be able to follow the prompts in order to execute that idea, or to execute the deal, or bring the idea to your fellow colleagues in the workplace, or your fellow businessmen, as an example. So see, this explains that every idea, the fact that it's already there, means to say that there was the Eisis HaMachshava, the letters of thought, which allowed the Chokhmah to be presented to yourself. So every area where there's revelation, every area where there's in this case, a manifestation of a Elokus in these different worlds, from Elam Atzilus, which there it's Kayachma, there it's a Nafshi Stiki, there it's Ein Sof, but you're talking about the Ein Sof should be manifest in Elam Abriya, to be manifested in Metzir. So of course there's Asius, there is the notion of actual letters in order to bring that Giluya, the revelation of the Ein Sof, in the containers of Elam Abriya, for the Neshamas which are Elam Abriya, or the Malachim in Elam HaYetzira, for that matter, the Neshamas also in Elam HaYetzira, as we know, because it's Gan Eden Atacht. So of course there's Asius there as well. But there, the Asius ultimately are not that structured as Isis, because what is overwhelming is the insight, overwhelming is the Chokhmah, overwhelming is the understanding of the Torah, of those Talmid Shabbos, of the Talmid Chachamim. And just back to this example, when you have it structured, so of course there's some Isis, because the Isis, that's what establishes the structure of the thought, of the insight to yourself. But you can't compare having the insight in your own mind, even as a very clear, decisive insight, in comparison to relating that insight to another party or to other parties, trying to make this the theme of your next quarter, as an example, or the spirit of your next quarter, to be more successful in your next quarter over the previous quarter, as an example. There you're putting it into real words, and you're putting it into the words are very tangible, palpable words. You see which of course makes all the difference. You're writing up the different essays. You're putting these insight in words, in actual words, in writing, in a program, or talking to others about this insight that you came up with. There, the letters are much more tangible, because that's where they have to make the difference in the actual world which you are trying to impact, your own world, or your world of your society which you're trying to impact. If it's associated with finance, or any area which you're trying to be impactful. So in the former state, the Isis are more part of the Chokhmah. They don't stand out as clear, structured Isis and letters. As opposed to the latter, it's a different idea. There, the Isis, the letters, the formation of words, are completely distinct and different. So this is the Alter Rebbe said, continues. So of course there is the Isis which exist because only through the Eisis HaDibur, when we say Malchuscha Malchus Kol Elamim, which Dibur is Malchus, Malchus is Peh, we spoke about this many times, again, namely in Sharichah V'Emunah, and even over here, in this Igeris, and other Igeris, that this is Malchuscha Malchus Kol Elamim. The speech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu produces Elam HaBriya, and produces Elam HaYitzirah. Of course, there's letters, but the letters are still part of the Chochmah, again, the Chochmah of Atzilus, which again represented by the Torah, which are learned by the Talmid Chacham, which draw this energy into Elam HaBriya, into Elam HaYitzirah. But the Aisius are really can be overwhelmed more by the spirit of Chochmah, the spirit of the Torah, which Chochmah bring the energy of Chochmah, which is the Ein Sof, which is meant to be revealed and meant to be manifest in the Elam HaBriya and Elam HaYitzirah. So of course there is Aisius. Malchus Malchus Kol Elamim. However, if you want to draw the energy and life force from this supreme breath, oxygen or breath of the Heitato, of the inferior Hey, that's where you have the Chitzenis Hadibur, the Hey Maitzis Hapeh, the 5 instruments of the mouth, Kaviyachal Umaylo. Shuffle to this lowly world. It seems some God will be Yeser, which is a great concealment and condensement, because it is a total different. In other words, as we mentioned so many times, and it's existed so many memorim from the Attire and all the Rabbeim, the difference based on the Medrash, for example, which says Moshe Rabbeinu brought this Shechina down here Lamato in the 7th world. Moshe Rabbeinu's Deira Shvi, he brought it to this from the Shever Akim, and he brought it down to Elam Hazeh, and it says it's not only another step or a step lower, it's a different idea, and we can understand it. We don't have to elaborate on it, because the difference of Ruchnis and Gashmi, spiritual and physical, is Be'ein Areich. And so too, you're talking about Olam Hasi. It's not just another world, a lower world. You have to draw a bit more in order to bring the energy into this physical world. Because it's lower, so you have to draw it down lower, and it has its ways to draw it down lower based on, like we said before, the Talmud and Bria and the Mishnah and Yitzir and so on. No, this is a different idea, because here you have to bring it down to the Gashmias, to the physicality of Elam Hazeh, to the Chumnis of Elam, namely to the Gashmias of Elam Hazeh. This world is a physical world, so it's not enough just to draw the energy on a spiritual plane akin to the Talmud Chacham's learning, or associated with the Talmud Chacham's learning. Their action is so vital, action is so essential, because you have to bring it down to Ilam HaMaaseh. That's what Alter Rebbe says, because this is a great tzimtzum, it's a great contraction. You have to bring something from a spiritual plane down to a physical plane, meaning to say contraction, meaning to say it is something, you need enormous kayach to contract the ruchnius, because you want to take the spirit of that ruchnius and make it and bring it down to gashmius. Of course, it takes great tzimtzum. And a quick example: a deep thinker, a teacher, a Talmud Chacham, let's say in the world of Torah, a prodigy, an Ilui, and he has to teach a student the matters that he is learning. It's not just he's going to open a Gemara and learn the Gemara the way he understands the Gemara, because it would go fly straight over the child or the pupil. It doesn't matter the age; it's about the matter of the stage, namely. Because he has to convey something to another party, a party which is on a different plane completely. It's not that he's learning with Talmid Chachamim, which is a step lower than him, a level lower than him, a few levels lower than him. He's starting off with a pupil which doesn't know anything about the information which he is so acquainted with. There you need enormous tzimtzum and a strategy to contain the flow of your understanding on the subject, or understanding of this Gemara as an example, and find in tactics how to convey this, teaspoon this to that child or to that pupil, and they should truly understand, not only memorize what you're saying, but truly have an appreciation, understanding of the information that you're trying to convey. And for that, you have to be enormously involved not only in relating the information, but the tactic in order to contract the depth of the information in order to pass it on, because you're dealing with a different phenomenon, not just a few levels lower than yourself. As this example, Talmid Chachamim, which are not on your level, yet Talmid Chachamim, you're talking about someone who's not a Talmid Chacham, is not a Talmid, he just began to be a Talmid. So it's a quantum leap step from yourself to the other party. So you need enormous tzimtzum, in other words, strategize how to condense, how to contract your flow of energy, and to put the matters into right words that it should be understood, perceived, and appreciated by the pupil. And so too, you need a great tzimtzum which should come down to Elam Hazeh. And therefore, therefore it's not enough for the arousal of below over the top of Chachamim, which occupy themselves minority of their days in charitable work. You need the arousals of those who are Bale, master of mitzvahs, which occupy themselves most majority of their days in charitable work and extension of kindness, like it says in Likutei Amorim, in the first segment of Tanya, the chapter Lamed Dalet. As you can see there, actually it's a click away, the 34th chapter. The Alter Rebbe is speaking about the importance, the accomplishment of Tzedakah Gemilas Chasadim in that chapter, and what has had an impact Elam Hazeh, the entire Elam Hazeh, the entire physical world. Gives it examples the way it was in the Beis Hamikdash, with the flower offering and the animal offering and the oil offering and the libation and so on. You could look there in the first chapter, in the first segment, the 34th chapter. We'll stop over here with the text, so now we can understand, because you have to break through. You have to break into Elam Hazeh. You have to draw the matters into Elam Hazeh. It should make a difference in your life, in family life, in society, and in the entire world. You need the neshamas which are involved in that heitatah, this which is tantamount to the heitatah, the five instruments, the externality of speech, which in this case is the action of extending oneself with charity, and a lot of charities. The Alter Rebbe explained a number of places. And when it comes to charity, it has to come to a point where it hurts. And I don't want to just say this briefly or just to throw in the word, but the Alter Rebbe speaks about this in a number of places. Famously in Yud Beis and Igeres HaKodesh, we didn't get up to it to really get involved. The more one gets involved and stuck, and the more they're drawing the Ein Sof down here into Elam Hazeh Agashmi, and so to Gemilas Chasadim, to one leaves his comfort zone, her comfort zone, in order to truly extend himself to the other party based on the needs of the other party, not my checklist. And that's what ultimately makes the difference in this very physical world, to draw the Ein Sof again down into Elam Asiyah. To make that quantum leap step, you have to get involved in Asiyah, in action associated with the Heitata, the Dibur, the tangibility of letters, which is the externality of the Dibur, which this world is associated with. It could be Kashem Tzorei Lami. So you have to have this which is associated with the externality, of course, in comparison to the Torah, which is Pnimis. You have to have the Chitzenius, which is the action of Tzedakah and Gemilas Chasadim. It's worthwhile to see there the Chelek Aleph, Perek Lamed Dalet, again, wherever you are, wherever you're learning this. It's a click away over here. And the Rebbe should help Taka that there's so much chesed. I might as well point this out. There's so much chesed in the world today that we live in. So much stuck and so much chesed. So much kindness. So of course, all the energy would break through together with the Talmid Chachamim. There's so much Torah learning. You have such a beautiful combination in our generation. Not saying in comparison to the past, but there's such a beautiful combination. There's so much Torah learning. There's so much Mitzvah Sudden. So you have the hashpah from the Chochmei Law, the deepest parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which represents the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you have so much Gemilas Chasadim, and it's all ready to come down and make the manifestation, establish that manifestation of Elokus in every single place of this world, and ultimately transform this world, that we should be able to be Zeichet Tevah Hashem Melech Kol Haaretz. It should be manifest, the Ein Sof, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be manifest in this physical world, as the pasuk says, Ayin bi Ayin Yiru, the physical eye. As Chassidus underscores this, that the pasuk doesn't only say the neshamas will see Elokus, it says the eye will see Elokus. V'ro kol basar yachta, the physical flesh will be privy to appreciate and to see with their own eyes and to experience the Ein Sof being manifest in every area of life. And of course, by the Yid, there's a bracha in his Gashmi, as Bana Chaim Zein Revicha, which means all the brachas, again, Bana, children, life, and expansion of Parnasa. In other words, by a Yid, Gashmis again is right away associated with his Ruchnis. The more physical, the more brachas and Gashmis you have, the more he gives it right back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and brings more and more the Eir Leki, the Emes Hashem Le'olam, and again, which will come, of course, to its complete fruition when we're Zeicha to Moloretz Deis Hashem, B'Hai Hashem L'Melech Al Kol Ha'aretz, Al Kol Ha'aretz, the entire world, the entire land, the physicality of the world will be the greatest keli to the Malchus, to the reign of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashpah, and abundance, spiritual abundance, physical abundance. And again, in a one-liner, the coming of Mashiach. Have a wonderful night.